Hey everybody, welcome to the Quality of Life Prescription. I'm Dr. Neela Sandel. I'm joined by Drs. Dan Horzempa and Shannon Bybee Driscoll. This podcast is oriented to folks who are interested in integrative medicine, functional medicine, and how to improve the quality and span of your life.
All right, welcome.
All right.
So today we're going to be talking about ancient practices of yoga and meditation, these practices that have been around for thousands of years, and how we can apply them for stress relief and just to help people's overall health. So I think probably like Shannon and I had said, Neela, you're kind of the guy on this. So maybe we'll almost kind of interview you on this, but I would love to hear your viewpoint on just kind of for somebody who maybe has heard of yoga and meditation, hasn't gone to a yoga class, hasn't tried meditating. How would you start to frame what these practices are? Because I feel like there's a lot of different ways to describe what they are.
I think one of the misunderstandings about yoga and meditation are that they are a cultural thing, and people associate them with India. But in reality, these are just tools to achieve certain states biologically. And it really doesn't have to have anything to do with a culture, right? Like there are yoga poses, which are called asanas, and they all tend to have Sanskrit or Hindi names. But it's really not that important. What's important is that these are tools for changing our health. And yoga and meditation are part of the bigger system of health in India, again, so there's a cultural origin for these, but in no way do they need to be culturally linked to that. Europeans are just as able to access these things as someone from India. A South American is just as able to access this as someone from China. And in fact, most cultures have their own varieties of these things. You know, when we think about yoga, there are lots of parallels to these. Yoga is fundamentally a body practice, and meditation is fundamentally a spiritual practice. And one thing that is, I think, often missed is that there is a third element to this. It is that there is something called pranayama, which is sometimes called yogic breathing, and that is a subtle practice. And in India, they think about the human entity as being threefold. There are three parts to you. You have a body. You have a subtle body, which is sometimes we think in the West of this as mind or intelligence. But in India, they break this down into some more nuanced categories. Mind and intelligence are actually a separate entity in that philosophy. But we have a body, we have a mind, and we have a spirit. And so we are all three of those things simultaneously. And so yoga is just the Indian version of working on your body. Pranayama is just the Indian version of working on your mind. And meditation is just the Indian version of working on your spirit. And so, of course, right, there's a Christian and Catholic version of all these things as well, right? As there are basically in every tradition in the world. I think yoga and meditation have really enjoyed a renaissance outside of India in probably the past 60 years now, if not longer. And, you know, there's certainly household ideas at this point. I think most of our patients have played with these ideas and had varying levels of success with them. And they're just really fabulous tools.
Yeah. Well, that's a great description. I like, too, how you're talking about a practice that is body, mind, and spirit. And I think for me, you know, having come from more of a traditional sports fitness culture, one of the things that threw me off when I first did a yoga practice was, you know, I kind of went in thinking this was a body practice. And then inevitably, there's points during it where you're like, okay, well, no, something else is going on here. This is beyond... It's not bicep curls in the gym. Right? Just to take a crude example, it's not that. It is something now, not that you maybe couldn't say somehow integrate, some of the practices on the spiritual and mind part of this that you're talking about. I'm thinking back specifically to, folks like Schwarzenegger who talked about like the mind muscle connection. Like he was certainly not zoning out, with headphones in while he worked out. He was in a different state. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that it's been something I think, like you said, there are things in other cultures that are similar. I think yoga is pretty unique in its holism.
Part of the Indian medical system called Ayurveda is naturally integrative, right? Us three are integrative medicine doctors, and how we differ from mainstream medicine, there are many ways, but one of those is that we think of the human entity as a whole, right? We're not trying to be splitting. We don't want to split the body into a heart and a kidney and a brain and the skin, and these things are all separate. Go see a separate specialist for all these things. They don't talk to each other. You take this medicine for your kidney, guess what? It gives you a skin rash. Well, that's not my area of expertise. We don't do that, right? As integrative medicine doctors, we think about the big picture. We think about the whole person. And in India, they've just been doing this for a really long time. And so naturally, this is kind of leaked into their different practices. And so when you do yoga, it is artificial to say that this is only a body practice, because you are not only a body. And like you alluded to, right, Arnie, he's not just working on his body, he's working on his nervous system simultaneously, even though he's just doing bicep curls. And so this is, I think, a very useful paradigm for people to wrap their heads around. Because the value of integrative medicine, for instance, is that we create efficiency through these combinations, through this lack of reductionism. Right? It naturally is more efficient to see ourselves as the big picture. And so when we do a yoga practice, if we have a great teacher, they are naturally going to wrap in these other things.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, I was just speaking with a patient just today who's a big yogi person. And I'm just like, tell me more about yoga. I've never been involved, gone to a couple of classes, but didn't really enjoy it. And he explained it to me in a way that now makes me appreciate it for what it is.
Cool.
It was actually, yoga is really a way to prepare the mind and body for meditation, to quiet things down, to allow the release of trapped energy through these poses that are difficult, that, get the muscles to fasciculate a little bit and release that energy so that when you're ready to sit and meditate, you can, because that energy has been discharged.
It's an exercise system, right? Dan, you're doing that at the gym, right? You are strengthening muscles and working flexibility. Yoga is just a way to do that without any weights. And Shannon, your patient hit the head right on the nail there. The reason that there are these three different practices, yoga, pranayama, and meditation, is that they build into each other. They all allow each other. And yoga makes the body quiet. Pranayama makes the mind quiet. And the goal is actually meditation. I think most people had the experience of trying to meditate or pray, right? Those are actually largely synonymous. Of having the experience of trying to do those things but being distracted. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, let me sit down and let me really focus on what's important to me in my life and my spirituality. Also shopping lists. It's like, okay, hang on, get that out of my head, right? And so the yoga makes the body quiet. Pranayama, yogic breathing, makes the mind quiet. And I think it's a shame that that's kind of not gotten as much press, if you will, as much prestige and cultural buy-in as yoga, because it is arguably more important, right? The yoga is there to make the pranayama doable. The pranayama is there to make the meditation or prayer doable. And that's the goal. When we think about the human entity, in Ayurveda, particularly, they think about the human entity from the top down, if you will. And again, this is a bit artificial because it's all integrated, yes. But you are fundamentally your spirit or consciousness or soul. And that then embodies through these different layers, which is to say that the mind and the body are a result of the spirit, which I think most spiritualists would agree with, regardless of their culture. And therefore, if we want to do the most efficient thing for our life, we should go to the most efficient upstream place. And this is why meditation is thought to be so valuable for human health. Because when our consciousness is open and aware and paying attention to things, then we have the capacity to make modification, right? There's that old saying, knowing is half the battle. And as I am fond of saying, the root of health is awareness or consciousness. And so I kind of say that tongue in cheek because it means two things simultaneously, right? It has a very literal functional fashion in that if you pay attention to an issue, then you can modify it, right? You have to see it. But also, consciousness is the root of health, right? That spirit is the aim of things, which is why prayer is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And, certainly, we've been talking about these practices and them having been around for as long as they've been around. But certainly science has had some time to get its hands on these and start to look and start to see, what changes happen. And some of the stuff that's caught my attention is certainly some of the neuroimaging. And I'm sure you're aware of it, but, seeing certain areas of the brain having enhanced activity. I'm thinking of like the hippocampus, which is kind of a key part of the brain for memory, and especially, long-term memory formation. Seeing certain areas of the brain, the activity go down, areas that are surrounding fear and anxiety, like the amygdala. And then certainly seeing, prefrontal areas light up as well, and these are certainly the, highest level of the nervous system, the kind of thing that separates humans and higher level primates from everyone else. And it seems to also activate those areas. So like these, while they are ancient practices, like science has looked at them and we're seeing a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
I think of that as progressive, right? You guys are used to pushing the envelope on the health science personalized to your patients, right? You guys are engaging in a active scientific process with your patients, trying to say, well, how do we go further than what is the accepted science? And therefore, you guys are well attuned with the idea that science is progressive. It's always evolving, right? This is why doctors used to say, well, I have a practice, right? It wasn't a doctor's office, it's a doctor's practice. And I've always thought of that as a reminder to medical doctors. Well, okay, we're evolving. We're continuing to grow. We're not at the end of the science, right? Science is not a established thing. It is not monolithic. It is not singular. It is our best current approximation of the truth, right? And so when I see people doing consciousness studies and neurologic studies on people who are engaging in yoga or pranayama or meditation, to me that just seems like a given. I was like, yeah, I mean, you talk to anybody in India or in China where they have qigong in their own practice, and they'll say, yeah, this works. Our people live a long time because of this. And I'm like, well, we probably should study that. That is curious, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think these studies are important, certainly too, because there will always be a subset of the population that is really looking for that support.
Which is fair, right? It's good to be skeptical.
Yeah, no. And I mean, what you're saying is when it's part of the culture, there is an implicit understanding. This is helpful. This is longevity promoting. This is quality of life promoting. And the population just understands that. But when you're kind of bringing new practices into populations that didn't grow up with them, it's really good to have some of these objective metrics, which I don't think even begin to capture the complexity of yoga and meditation, by the way. Just so
I agree fully with that. Again, we're just starting this science.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're at the kind of the tip of the iceberg,
and the amazing thing, it's good to have some foundation to build faith on, and I mean literally a foundation from which to suspend our disbelief, to say, well, okay, this thing's worth looking at. Let me try it, right? And that could be as simple as my friend did it and they said it was cool. Or my friend did it and they said there were attractive ladies in my yoga class. I want to go check that out. Whatever it is, right? And it could be scientific studies. And they're like, well, I need to see the science in this. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever it takes. But humans are naturally scientific, right? Look at kids. They're all about absorbing their natural environment, making determinations based off their experience, and then integrating into their lives. I say, well, I like this. I don't like that. Like, well, why? I did this one. It made me feel poorly. I did this one. I felt great. Like, okay, yeah. So maybe we shouldn't eat that lollipop. Like, wait a minute. So I think of these practices very similarly. They're experiential, and it's very cool to see science helping people get to a place where they could try it. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating. People who try these things will realize in short order, particularly if you have a good teacher, that there is something really unusual here, really unique here. And it's just like people go to the gym, right? And they go, this is hard at first. But if you have a good trainer or a good buddy, Dan, who teaches you what to do, then you're able to go, yeah, I kind of like this. It started up a little rough. It was alien to me. But, now it's great. And Dan told me it was great. And so you suspend your disbelief. You kind of get through the rough patch of starting up a new habit, a new thing. And then you start to be aware that it's modifying things for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it ends up being kind of what we talk about a lot here is behavioral change and how that happens. And how that happens often kind of gradually and slowly. And that's okay.
Yeah, what I really appreciated from this conversation and the one I had earlier is like meditation is really hard, and deep prayer is really hard, just for the same reasons you're talking about, Neil. Like, we're always running through the grocery list and I got to do this and I got to do that. Oh, shoot. Ooh. I mean, I'm focused on my breathing. When you actually prepare for the meditation or the prayer with the activity that comes before, like we're preparing the body and then we're preparing the mind, and now we're ready to deal with the spirit. The whole thing makes so much more sense. And like, we should all be able to do it, go to that practice a little bit more prepared. If we realize there are steps to get you there, you can't just sit down and start that prayer and stay focused. You really need to go in with intention and that consciousness that you're talking about, that this is something I'm planning to do. How do I get to that destination the best way possible?
Yeah, it takes a little bit of time to kind of gear up into that habit, to change that habit. And again, going to the gym is the same idea, right? The first several times you go, it's like, this is awkward. I don't really know what I'm doing. And you have a buddy with you who keeps you going, and eventually you start to go, that feels really good, actually. The days I go to the gym, I feel better. Maybe I should do this more often. And everything grows from that willingness to try it, and then the honest skepticism. I think skepticism is a lovely thing. Does it work for you or not? Don't waste your limited time doing stuff that doesn't work for you. But I think most people who get into a yoga or pranayama or qigong or prayer or meditation practice, all of these different things, they are just hacks. They're body hacks. They're mind hacks. They're hacks for quality of life. When you do these things, they allow you to achieve a higher quality of life. And if that seems dubious to you, first of all, good for you for being skeptical. That's honest, right? Great. Nothing wrong with that. But go around and look openly, look honestly, right? Make that skepticism honest. You're not sure, so you investigate. Go around and look at people who routinely meditate. And, I will maybe hold yoga a little at a little bit of a distance here, because yoga in the West has certainly become a sort of detached practice. Like in New York City, there's all sorts of athletic yoga practices which really focus on getting a yoga butt. And it's great, nothing wrong with that, right? But it's not the real thing. It's not an incremental process towards improving your mind and your spirit. So it's a little limited, fine as introductory. But look at people who do meditation or real yoga or qigong and just spend time with them or observe them. What is their mental state? What is their happiness? How do they interact with other people? And this isn't, of course, there are very few absolutes. This is not necessarily always true. There are probably some people who have good meditation practices who are kind of angry folk, right? But generally, you're going to go, man, that person is really happy. How'd they get there?
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, well, it's really easy. You've heard about it before. You just haven't tried it yet. So, I really love the scientific studies. And to your point, Dan, when we look at things like the hippocampus becoming activated and the amygdala becoming down-regulated, right, what does that do? Well, it makes us happy, right? We're experiencing less fear. We're feeling more empowered. And these are the sort of things that a good teacher is going to tell you are the potential benefits. But it is really cool to also go, oh man, the brain images that shows that it's there.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, what is your quality of life prescription? I put this to both of you, and we'll narrow it to meditation. When a patient says, okay, I'm interested, how many days a week, time, what are we looking at as to giving them a starting point on this?
I think it's a lot like exercise. You start slowly, get some small victories, and then start to build on that. And so I would say take some time every day. It wraps very, very well into either an early morning rise and shine routine or into an evening getting ready for sleep routine, right? These are naturally quiet times during the day. And I advise patients just take 5 minutes routinely. And if you're having fun with it, feel free to expand that. If you're having trouble with that, do some prep work for it. Exactly like you were saying, Shannon. Make sure that you're in the right headspace for it. This is one of the reasons why first thing in the morning is typically preferred in these communities. It's just a little bit easier. You're less likely to have your grocery list or whatever from the day in your head first thing in the morning. It's considered an auspicious time. And I think most early birds really understand that intuitively. There's a deep sense of the peacefulness of the early morning. So I would tell people, just take 5 minutes every morning. Just spend some time with it. Just spend some time with yourself.
Yeah. Is what you're describing, I've heard the concept of frequency over intensity when it comes to meditation. Is that a bit of what you're describing?
Yeah, I would say so. And there is no one size fits all. No two people are the same. Do what feels good. If you only enjoy meditation with, a serious 1 hour session with no interruption, well, pursue your bliss, make time for that. But I will say that for most people, just having 5 minutes a day where they drop their phones and they get everything off their to-do list and just be with your own consciousness, which is synonymous with being with yourself, right? Don't be with all the externals and the stuff and the things you got to do. Just be with yourself and practice that and try to clear your mind, be comfortable for 5 minutes. And of course, most people go, well, I'm bored, right? Right? It's like, time for the next thing. I'm like, okay, that's a red flag. that means this will be highly valuable for you, incredibly valuable for you. And let's downregulate those areas in the brain that are creating anxiety. Build a habit of doing that so that you don't find yourself washed away by the day. So I like to just challenge patients a little bit on that. Take 5 minutes, see how that goes. And if it's a struggle for you, well, let's talk about ways to help you get there.
Great.
Yeah, I love it. I can't add anything to that. Just a little bit at a time and challenge yourself to do it.
And sometimes I've told patients too, and this is a separate topic, which maybe we can launch into at a later date, but maybe go, if you have a day where you can go do sensory deprivation, go float for an hour, go do, and pay attention to what you feel like after that hour. And that's what you're searching for with meditation. We want to get you to the point where you can kind of closer get to that without, being in a huge tank full of salty water in the dark floating. We want to kind of get you to where you can be sitting on your living room couch and starting to break into some of that stillness of mind.
I would argue that there are a lot of essential functions that are performed during meditation. To your point, right? You feel a very particular way, and I would talk about it similar to sleep, in the idea that sleep is something that is unique unto itself. There's no way to replace that. And when people spend time in that state that you're describing, and I love that point, Dan, sensory deprivation tanks are a way to kind of bring ourselves there to, get a little extra help to get into that practice, maybe jumpstart it. And then we feel it and we go, whoa, that's really unique. Maybe I should be there more often. And the science very much showcases the value, increasingly so, of doing this. And so people do, just like having a great nap or you're getting a really good night's sleep, you're like, dang, I feel really good after that.
Well, Mila, Dan, this was a great prescription. I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to talk about yoga, talk about pranayama. Is that how you say it?
Pranayama, yeah.
And how, even in the Indian way, there are many ways in which we are all bringing this together. And, how do we integrate this small piece into our lives where there is peace of mind, peace of body, and peace of spirit? And it will absolutely increase our longevity.
Yeah, great, guys. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Let us know what questions you guys have. We're going to put this up on qualityofliferx.com. If you guys have any questions, want us to get deeper into any topics, please let us know.
Great. All right. Well, see everyone next time.
Hey, this is Dr. Sandel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can see all of our latest episodes. Make sure you don't miss any of the tips so you can live your best life.